Hey, what's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine. Hope you all are doing well. In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about 5 simple ways to get louder mixes. Now, when I say louder, we're not talking about in terms of necessarily a LUFS integrated reading or any other numerical value. And I think this is where a lot of you are getting confused about actual loudness and perceived loudness, not just loudness in terms of LUFS or another numerical value. So we're going to be talking about some different ways to elevate that perceived loudness for your mix, for your master, so that you can get the sound and the loudness to compete with a lot of these other songs that you all are listening to. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so the first way to easily increase your loudness of your mix and your perceived loudness, more importantly, is to utilize a bus compressor. There's a lot of people out here who are, smacking a bus compressor on the stereo bus, getting a lot of compression, and they're just squashing their mix, killing their dynamics, and that's just not the best way to do it. So I'm going to show you why I utilize a very low ratio here on the native Bus Compressor 2, and then I'm also doing a dry-wet mix, so we're processing it essentially in parallel, and so we can maintain a lot more of our dynamics, and again, just increase that perceived loudness. So let's play it back with this disabled, and then I'll engage it. Just to note, this is the first plugin on my stereo bus chain here. The lights come on when you put this on. I hope you feel my love up above, down low in the sub. Think twice before you cut it. Yeah, the ones I gave the most, expect the most back. Can't build trust, just signing that contract. Hard lessons, even with the best intentions. Some of y'all steady flexing, don't take it personal, cause I stay versatile. Even if you did me wrong, it was worth it all. Tribulation, build innovation, growth, my motivation. Pure intentions, drive the vision, so relentless, how to get this. All the way from the start, I can feel it in my heart beating through my chest. Even in my lowest when I'm drowning in the stress, I found the flow, next level, yo. So we get this nice, pleasant lift. We're not changing any of the essential dynamics of our mix, which is the goal, utilizing a bus compressor or really any mastering processing, stereo bus processing. We want to leave all that intact. The second way to get louder mixes, actual loudness, perceived loudness, is to focus on your mid-range and do some boosting, some compression here in the mids. We talk so much about low end, about the high end, and how to get these to sound their best, but the mid-range is really where perceived loudness lies, and a lot of people are just not focusing on the mid-range. We're going to compress some of the mids and control them, but then we're going to subtly lift them as well in level, so we're going to get a higher perceived loudness of those mids and of our mix overall. So let me show you how this works here. We're going to set a couple of bands. The first one we'll do around 500, so let's just dial this in at about 580, and let's solo that so you can just hear what's going on in our mix.
On all of these records, I say what I want to say. I'm sorry if I showed up faded.
So quite a bit of information there, especially in the vocal, the low mids, and then we're going to set another one. Let's put this one at maybe 1500, and we'll just kind of split these in half here. Let's listen to that band as well.
I did it my way, now I plan out my days on all of these records. I say what I want to say. I'm sorry if I showed up faded.
A lot of the weight and the impact of our vocal is in this range. So again, we're just going to compress them pretty subtly. So let's keep an eye on what's going on down here, and I'll adjust the range, maybe the ratio a little bit.
I did it my way, now I plan out my days on all of these records. I say what I want to say. I'm sorry if I showed up faded. I guess it's better now than be belated. Happy all the times we've wasted. Substance out of nothing we crave it. Don't get it twisted, I'm not conflicted, I'm just out living my truth.
We're getting a few dB of compression there, and now we're just going to boost the output of both of those bands. So let's do maybe, 2.5 to 3 dB on each of these just to add it back, and let's see what happens here. Maybe we'll add even more.
I did it my way, now I plan out my days on all of these records. I say what I want to say. I'm sorry if I showed up faded. I guess it's better now than be belated. Happy all the times we've wasted. Substance out of nothing we crave it. Don't get it twisted, I'm not conflicted, I'm just out living my truth.
Another thing to note is by focusing on the mids and getting our loudness there, this is going to translate on pretty much any speaker. So even phones, small speakers, and actually those speakers are going to be a lot more focused in this area in terms of the frequencies they reproduce. So it's a smart idea to utilize this mid-range to increase our perceived loudness. The third way to get louder mixes, louder masters, elevate your perceived loudness is to utilize saturation and excitement. So a lot of you have questions about what saturation is. The easiest way to think about it is it's a subtle distortion. So it's not going to be as obvious as exaggerated. It will add harmonics and a thickness and a weight to whatever sounds you apply it to. The hook vocal, I'm utilizing the Empirical Labs Mic E comp, specifically the preamp section. And this has some nice preamp saturation, some analog characteristics that are introduced. Once again, increasing perceived loudness. So if we set it to clean, I'll turn this on so you can hear it.
I'm sorry if I showed up faded. I guess it's better now than belated. Happy all the times we wasted. Substance out of nothing we crave. I'm sorry if I showed up faded. I guess it's better now than belated. Happy all the times we wasted. Substance out of nothing we crave it.
If you're finding these things to sound really subtle, just remember that these are being applied across our entire mix. So each of these little increases and little boosts in perceived loudness equal a big difference. In this same chain, I'm actually adding a bit more saturation with this plugin, the Greg Wells Voice Centric from Waves. It once again does some cool things in terms of analog modeling and just adding a bit of heat to our vocal.
I'm sorry if I showed up faded. I guess it's better now than belated. Happy all the times we wasted. Substance out of nothing we crave it.
Just to get your wheels turning, you can be very creative with how you're combining different saturations from different plugins. With our beat, I'm just going to go ahead and solo that. I have I Am Pusher on this, and I utilized this magic control. This is an exciter that will be applied to the entire signal, going to give us a subtle lift, but we can also utilize this focus control, which is going to do just that, focus the dynamics of the mix. So let's take a listen to what this does. So it might seem subtle, but it's actually adding a lot of weight, a lot of presence to our entire beat mix. The fourth way to get louder mixes, higher perceived loudness, is to utilize multi-band limiting. So this is something that I've been taking advantage of more recently. Many of you are just kind of smacking that maximizer on there, pulling the threshold down really low, not taking into account individual bands per se. It's just processing the entire mix as a whole. If you have, say, a particularly low-end heavy mix like I have here, that's going to play in directly to how that maximizer is reacting. And it's usually at the detriment of the rest of your mix, and you're not going to really be able to push and enhance and bring up the rest of those bands across the mix. We lose some of that perceived loudness in the mids and other areas because that limiter is working so hard on the low end. So with the multi-band limiter, we can set different bands here, and then we can set priorities across these bands so that the maximizer knows, okay, work hard on this. Don't, try to kind of rein in on this as much. So I'll show you how this works. Let's just set our crossover points up here. Let's do something like maybe 120 for the low, going down into our subwoofer. Then we'll maybe do something like 750, and then let's do 2000 and 4000. I think that'll give us some different bands to work with. But I'm going to go down to the low end. I'm going to set the value higher, which means it's going to be lower priority in terms of where this threshold is going to hit. So let's play that back and I'll show you what that does.
Don't get it twisted, I'm not conflicted, I'm just out living my truth. You know I ain't perfect, some days feel worthless, prayers stay up high for the youth.
When I pull that threshold up, you could see that the maximizer or the limiter, it's not even attenuating right there because I set that higher, and it's going to work on attenuating some of these other bands. So let's adjust those accordingly as well.
Don't get it twisted, I'm not conflicted, I'm just out living my truth. You know I ain't perfect, some days feel worthless, prayers stay up high for the youth. And I could never judge you, grudge with you, while you're on your own walk.
So now that we've set that up, you can see that we're going to get the most attenuation here in this low mid band, removing some of the mud, and then also, this 2K to 4K band, we're going to get some removal of some of that harshness. Now, not only can we push the rest of our maximization harder across our mix, but we can also now bring up the gain in, say, this band here, this 1K, 2K area that we've been focused on. So let's go down there and we'll boost that gain up, maybe a dB. And then let's say that we're going to boost the gain up on this low mid just because we are going to get some more attenuation. So we'll do that. And then the high end, maybe like a half dB here. And we'll pull the threshold down a little bit lower.
I'm sorry if I showed up faded. I guess it's better now than being bladed. Happy all the times we wait. I'm sorry if I showed up faded. I guess it's better now than being bladed. Happy all the times we wasted. Substance out of nothing we craving.
All right, you with me? The fifth and last way to achieve louder mixes, higher perceived loudness, is to carefully select references to compete with for level. In this case, I was focused on, matching the loudness across some songs that were on this album. So I loaded those in. They already had the loudness where I needed them to be. However, if you're trying to compete with another song that you're hearing on Spotify or something like that, I would recommend buying the lossless version. So the FLAC version or the wave version, even better, and then loading that into this reference tab of Ozone. This is very, very useful to load up different references, and I can very easily cue this reference while I'm listening to my session and directly compare them. So let's just take a listen to how that works.
Beef, kick drum knocking out your teeth. It's not the faith to lean on, but the truth and the hope. It's all clouded and smoke. Taught you how to chase these dreams, keep you in a box. Follow the flock. I lay this all before your throne, Lord. These records, I say what I wanna say. I'm sorry if I showed up faded. Focusing these tired eyes, be bladed. Happy although you empty dreams for a fee. Deep down, we got the faith, don't leave.
You don't have to be looking at an LUFS meter or get any kind of numerical measurement to hear the potential differences in what you're referencing here in the Ozone Advanced Reference tab. So very, very useful. You can cue different parts of the song, compare choruses to chorus, verse to verse. Very quick and easy way to make sure that you're competing and getting the actual loudness. All right, y'all, those are 5 easy ways to get louder mixes, to increase perceived loudness, and just enhance the dynamics of what you already have in your mix, in your master. Make sure to retain, what the engineers work so hard for in terms of the impact, the punch, the low end, the presence, and just give us more of a lift in terms of the mid-range, some of the things that we're not focusing on in terms of using your ears to actually get an idea of loudness rather than looking at meters and measuring just purely based on numerical values. So I hope this gets your wheels turning in terms of kind of pulling your head out of the meters and really listening and picking up on these subtleties that across your entire session, all these add up in a big, big way. So I hope this is helpful. If you learn anything in the video, please like, subscribe, and consider sharing. Hit that notification bell for more. We'll talk to you soon.